So this is the west end of the Old Man Reservoir. It's where we get our fresh water for the municipal district. As you can see down below us, there's not much water left in the reservoir. The freshwater intakes themselves are above water, which means that we're having to truck fresh water continuously to our water treatment plant in order to supply our residents with their drinking water. Thousands of dollars a day is what it's taking to continue getting fresh water to residents.
Hi, I'm David Dodge. Welcome to Green Energy Futures. As forest fires, smoke, floods, drought, and other impacts are gripping Alberta communities, the idea of climate adaptation has quickly transformed from something we should do to prepare for the future to something that's urgently needed today. In response to situations just like the one in Pincher Creek, the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre received $4.5 million from the Alberta government to help communities assess climate risks and prepare adaptation plans.
These communities are all working on climate adaptation plans, which tell them the risk. So what is the likelihood of climate events happening, and what is the consequence when those events happen? One of the projects that we have is in Pincher Creek, both the town and the MD, and they're working with Piikani Nation. In that area, there have been problems with droughts and fires. This summer, they have an issue with water supply. There's almost no water. They're trucking water in.
We headed down to Pincher Creek and met up with Energy Manager Tristan Walker to get a sense of why climate adaptation plans are becoming more important for communities. The town and MD of Pincher Creek received $160,000 to assess the climate risks and come up with 35 adaptation actions they can take.
The goal with this plan was to really engage with stakeholders in the area and understand what their perception of the risks were, and then to get data to back that up. So we did a big climate model to go into the future to see what our climate would look like if we reached 3 degrees of warming globally.
Pincher Creek worked with the One Sky Foundation to apply climate modeling and conduct risk analysis.
The final report that we received had a couple different sections. The first was an analysis of the climate change based on climate models and what that would look like throughout Pincher Creek. We also had an economic analysis done, so what the cost of not adapting to these changing climates would have on our area.
The report predicts hotter summers, 15 more plus 30-degree days per year, higher annual precipitation, and many more frost-free days. This sounds pretty good until you realize that climate change also brings dramatic swings, such as this year's drought.
Both wildfire risk and wildfire smoke risk were large potential risks. We saw drought being a potential risk as well. With the impact to winter recreation, we also saw flooding to be a risk as well. So the high intensity storms or water events that potentially aren't consistent but could happen in a major way with the changing climate.
The report looked at the economic risks of climate change as well.
So what we saw was an increase from $10 million in 2025 through to $18 million by 2030 and into $20+ million by 2050 in the cost of doing nothing.
Tanya Plaineagle is with the Piikani First Nation. They work with Pincher Creek on their plan and are doing their own climate plan as well.
I brought a lot of environmental messages or things when it comes to the land, and I feel like that's from my First Nations or my Piikani perspective, right? Because that's something that we're doing on a daily basis, right? We're always out on the land, or we're worried about the conditions of the land. Living within this area, right? It's something we've said many times before, is we don't just stop at the borderline of our reserve. We're what happens in Piikani happens in Pincher Creek. You look at the social components, you look at the health components, and then you look at the environmental components when it comes to heat and fires, specifically this summer too. One of the kind of sad things that I've been seeing is people looking forward to summer being over because they don't have to deal with smoke and they don't have to deal with, the bad air quality. And that's because of like all of the fires that are out there.
Wildfire touched the MD of Pincher Creek in 2017, when the Waterton Fire raged across the west slopes of the Rocky Mountains.
The municipal district was basically the resource center for fighting this wildfire. And as you can see, the devastation that it had on the forests in the area was pretty substantial.
As part of their climate plan, Pincher Creek brought in stakeholders and fire experts to look toward future preparedness.
We learned that fires are getting more frequent. We're seeing them more often, and especially in the Pincher Creek area, we basically have a 365-day fire season. We now have a regional emergency management organization, and our director is working with our fire department to come up with fire smart plans, working with residents to support fire smarting their own buildings and their properties. And as well as coming up with wildfire smoke response plans.
Perhaps ironically, flooding has also happened in Pincher Creek, and the town is working to manage the risk of rising waters.
A rubber gasket, basically, that we can see here. And that rubber gasket, when there's enough back pressure on it, lets water flow out into the creek, down into the waterway. However, when the creek itself rises and we're starting to get those flood activities, this will prevent any water from the creek going back up into our drainage system, which would flood the streets and residences.
The town is also thinking about improving quality of life on increasingly hot days.
So heat was one of the major risks that was identified within this climate adaptation report. As you can see here, the spray park is one of the ways that we're currently trying to mitigate that by giving access to our residents for a way to come cool down, still recreate, get out of the heat. We've also planted a bunch of trees around the area to try and provide that shade for the residents that are coming and maybe not participating in the spray park activities themselves.
The impacts of climate change are affecting all communities, but the impacts vary from place to place. The actions required are far-reaching and often expensive, so communities must now prioritize action to get the best bang for their buck and to protect their communities. Visit the Municipal Climate Change Action Center website to see case studies from numerous other communities. The MCCAC is a partnership of Alberta municipalities, rural municipalities of Alberta, and their funder, the Alberta government. Learn more in our blog at GreenEnergyFutures.ca. If you like solution-oriented stories like this one, check out our other 350 stories and be sure to subscribe. For Green Energy Futures, I'm David Dodge.